Video được Việt hóa bởi Ngọc Tân từ group tài nguyên dựng phim. Nghiêm cấm các hành vi lít về rồi bán cho thằng khác. Mọi ý kiến đóng góp xin gửi về Facebook Quỳnh Ngọc Tân.
Let's take a look at how to create something out of nothing in the edit page. And by that, I mean creating a text title and looking at some of the generators inside of the edit page. So we have the kids arriving at the crash site. And let's say we want to make a little X-Files title thing here that says Oregon 10:59 p.m. The way that we would do that is in our effects panel, here where it says titles, we can grab any of these titles up here. We can start with something that's close to what we want, or we can kind of build our own. And if you mouse over them, you can see a little example. So let's just grab text, and I'm going to drag this down into the timeline. And instead of dragging it onto a clip like you would with the effects, we're actually going to drag it in the layer above, and it's going to become its own thing. So now we can move this around and trim it just like we would a regular clip. And so let's just make this the same length as our first clip here, and we can fade it in just like a clip. And so now let's see what we got. So now we have our basic title showing up right there, but let's change this to be not so basic. With the text selected, I can go up here to our inspector and surprise, surprise, anything that we want to change with this title, we can change up here in the inspector. So for font family, let's do Courier because X-Files, and we'll take the size down a little bit. Maybe we'll align it to the left, and we can adjust its position, and we'll put it down here in the corner just like that. And we can type it in.
Video được Việt hóa bởi Ngọc Tân từ group tài nguyên dựng phim.
Oregon Wilderness, 10:59 p.m. And then we'll also anchor this on the left so that as we type more or less, it grows from the left. Let's put that here. And now we have this fading up like that. That's cool. There are a ton of different options here in this text title. Everything from adding a stroke to a drop shadow. Drop shadow is usually a pretty good idea. Let's zoom this in so we can see what the heck we're doing. Just offset this a little bit and not blur it. And we can kind of see that drop shadow a little better. We'll just move this over just a little bit, just so we have this little tiny drop shadow there. Helps it be a little bit more readable. Yeah, that's nice. We can even put a background behind this. All we have to do is grab this height parameter and just push it up. And it has this little box behind it. Really nice. So that's a great basic title. Let's say we want to do something like this, but we want it to type on, you know, like the X-Files. Well, there are a few different ways to do that. We could cut this up and make 20 different titles and have each one add a letter each time, but that would be miserable. So what's going to be easier is to actually use this text plus. So text is for really basic stuff, but if you want to animate things or kind of transform the text or have it wobble around or anything like that, you're probably going to want to use text plus. So let's get rid of text and let's grab text plus, and it works the same way. Put this over our clip here. And we'll say Oregon Wilderness, 10:59 p.m. And our font, let's go to Courier New. And we'll take our size down. We'll anchor it on the left, same thing. But you can see with the Text Plus, we have all these little tabs up here. And there are a lot of different controls for Text Plus. I mean, it's a little out of hand. But if we switch to the Layout tab, we can grab the center and move this down just like we would with the regular text. And there we go. Now, the reason why we're using Text Plus is if we go back to the Text tab here, and we go all the way down, there's this little parameter here called Right On. Or as I like to call it, Right On. Sorry. but I do like to call it that. If we take either the start or the end, this kind of types it out, which is really cool. So what we can do is start at the very beginning of our shot, and let's take this end parameter here, and we'll just push this all the way to the left so that start and end are both 0. And now we're going to animate this. Now we haven't talked about animating at all, and we are going to get into that a little more, especially in the Fusion page. But for now, if you're not familiar with animation, what we really have to do is set the beginning and the end of whatever we want to animate, and Resolve will animate in between them. So the beginning is right here. And the way that we tell it that we want this to be at 0 at this frame is just to be on the frame and click this little diamond right here until it turns red. Then we'll move to when we want this to be done, let's say in about 2 seconds. And let's push this all the way up back to 1. And there it makes this one red too. That means that it's on a keyframe. A keyframe is just telling Resolve at a certain time we want this to be a certain value. So at 2 seconds and 11 frames, we want this start to be 0 and end to be 1. If we hit this little arrow, that'll go to our first keyframe. And at 0 seconds and 0 frames, we want this to be at 0 and 0. And then in between, when we play it, it's going to animate in between those values, which will make it look like this is being typed on. Isn't that awesome? That's some basic animation. That one's for free. Pretty cool. So all of these titles work basically the same way. You drag it into the timeline, it makes its own thing, and then you adjust it here in the inspector when it's selected. Fusion titles work in a similar way, but again, they are using the power under the hood of Fusion. So they sometimes have a little bit harder time playing back. This one seems to be working just fine. If you're having trouble with these Fusion titles, that's why, because it takes a lot more power to play these back, because they have all kinds of advanced animation and masking and all kinds of stuff. Last thing I want to go over is generators, which again work basically the same way as titles, but it's not text, it's all kinds of fancy stuff. So we can generate something like bars, we can generate just a solid color. One of my favorite things is the 4-color gradient. I can grab this and drag this in anywhere, and it creates this little rainbow. With this selected, in the inspector, you can change your colors. And what I like to do is make the upper left color and the lower right color kind of the same. And then the upper right color a little bit darker. And the lower left color, something like that, a little bit darker like that. And now we have this nice kind of soft background that we can put text over. And it's really nice, just kind of classy. It's a little bit nicer than just having a solid color. So there's a bunch of stuff like that to play with. All kinds of tools to let you be creative. So those are the basics of titles and generators. And really, we're at a point where we've pretty much covered most of what you would need to do, 90% of what you want to do in the edit page. So in the next chapter, we're going to be taking a look at the cut page. And we're really going to build on a lot of these concepts in a lot of the things that we've learned here. But now might be a good time to open up this project and try and make something yourself, either with this footage or footage that you've shot, and play around, get messy, make mistakes, just like Miss Frizzle says. I'll see you in the next chapter.